But now, tonight's Panorama, which is called AIDS, the Race for a Cure. We should warn you that because of the nature of the subject, some of the health advice in the programme is couched in extremely explicit sexual terms. The reporter is Margaret Jay.
Today, the government announced a new £6 million package to fight AIDS. More money for research, more money for treatment, more money for a nationwide information campaign. Tonight in Panorama, we report on the men, women and children who are the victims of AIDS, on the black market drugs and the fringe therapies that they turn to in desperation, while all over the world, the doctors compete in the race for a cure. Patrick and Lauren Burke are a young married couple who live in a small rural community in the United States. Until last year, their only problem was that Pat has haemophilia. Now their story is a grim foretaste of what may become the worst epidemic in modern history.
We have AIDS, and it can hit anywhere. Might be a little late for us, but it's not late for everybody else.
Like I didn't know I had the virus when I passed it on to Lauren.
Their baby son, Dwight, caught AIDS from his mother, Lauren, in pregnancy. She had been infected in normal sexual intercourse.
If I would have known then what I know now, that he was going to suffer every day of his life and hurt and cry and just be like this, then I don't know. I probably would have...
But how can you warn somebody if it's never happened before?
Right. We were the first. So... But if they would have told us, I think we would have waited.
And growing up with hemophilia, everything I wasn't allowed to do, I always said, well, my son's going to be. Make up for both of us.
It's a dreadful disease for the lovers, the friends, the wives, the husbands of individuals who get this. Because when you're taking care of the person who's dying, you actually are able to look at them and see yourself, possibly, in the future.
I think my little boy is going to die.
It's the first time I've ever heard you say that. You always said we were going to live. And that Dwayne was going to be okay. That's the first time he ever said he was going to die.
I think that I'll be around long enough for them to find a cure. So Lauren and I will be all right. I just wish a miracle could happen so our little boy would be all right too.
Today, 1-year-old Dwight is in intensive care, suffering hepatitis and brain infection. In West London, Chris Gresham, who was recently diagnosed with AIDS, now lives by himself. AIDS has shocked him into celibacy. At the moment, he feels well enough to paint his flat. He was only 19 when he suffered the first debilitating symptoms.
I was fatigued, also considerable weight loss. I was nearly 9 stone, and I'd gone down to 7 stone. It was a gradual thing, so I didn't really notice it until I actually got on the scales. And also sort of night sweats all the time.
What are night sweats exactly?
Well, you'd go to sleep at night, and as I'm sort of dozing off, my body temperature would rise, and by morning time, if the sleep was irregular, you would sort of wake up. By morning time, sometimes the bed would be drenched, sopping wet. Recently, I was very scared when I was in hospital. The fear did hit me, and you're sort of not about your wits. You're sort of a different person. So it isn't reason. It's not rational. It's just
But were
anxiety.
you scared of pain or suffering or death? Or...
No, I've experienced quite a lot of pain, and I'm not afraid of pain. I can't put my finger on it. It must be just afraid of the unknown, afraid that I was dying.
No patient has ever recovered from AIDS. AIDS is remorseless. It cripples the immune system, produces cancer, and often brain disease. Some people who catch the AIDS virus never seem to develop any symptoms, but they can still pass it on. So far, the best medical scientists in the world have been frustrated in their search for a way to stop the AIDS virus spreading.
We never thought it was going to spread this rapidly because this kind of virus is difficult to transmit, yet it is little by little spreading in different regions of the world. We never expected a high degree of fatality with this virus. The percentage of people infected who get seriously ill is high and growing. I don't know what the ultimate number is going to be. It could be 100%. It could be everyone infected is going to have a serious illness with this virus.
In the United States, AIDS victims are marching to demand more money, more attention. 7,500 people have died here, and over 1 million carry the virus. Emotional demonstrations like this one have helped push the federal budget for AIDS work from $5 million to $250 million in 4 years.
Our own ways call it forth.
Today, the British government gave more to AIDS research and education, but we still lag far behind. In contrast to New York, neither money nor passions have reached high levels in Britain yet.
The call I am making tonight is to those of you who have something to offer and are doing nothing but burying your heads in the sand and saying AIDS can never happen to me. If you can help, you damn well better get off your ass and help fight the greatest challenge we've had to face since Hitler tried to exterminate us. All our lives depend on it.
AIDS is short for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. That means the body's own defences against infection have been destroyed, causing people to die of illnesses that would otherwise not be fatal. AIDS is caused by a virus called human T-cell lymphotropic virus type 3, HTLV3 for short. The virus was identified only 2 years ago. AIDS is not contagious. You can't catch it from coffee cups or by shaking hands or kissing anyone. You can only catch the virus when a body fluid like blood or semen from someone who's already infected enters your system. Therefore, sexual intercourse is the commonest means of infection. Anal sex, with its frequent tearing of the tissues, is the commonest of all. So in Western countries, promiscuous homosexual men have so far been the most numerous victims. But vaginal intercourse transmits the virus as well. In Africa, where it all began, AIDS is suffered in equally large numbers by both men and women. So anyone can get it. In 5 years, it's now spread to America and to Europe. Some haemophiliacs had the misfortune a few years ago to catch the virus from infected blood products. But that shouldn't occur again, at least in this country, because now all blood products are screened. Heroin addicts have picked up the virus by exchanging dirty needles. This is what the AIDS virus does. Normally, if any virus or bacteria enters a healthy body's bloodstream, it alerts the so-called T cells. These stimulate the B cells into multiplying and producing antibodies that will attack the invading virus. This defensive operation is known as the body's immune system. But when the HTLV3 or AIDS virus, the red triangles, enters the bloodstream, they attack the T cells themselves. Consequently, the B cells are not alerted and produce no antibodies. Meanwhile, the AIDS viruses use the T cell as a breeding ground to multiply. Thousands of new AIDS viruses are created that go on progressively demolishing the body's immune system. With the help of an electron microscope, you can see newly generated AIDS viruses emerging from a host T cell that has been invaded and is now a virus factory. The healthy T cell is destroyed by this process. Dr. Robert Gallo leads the American research team on AIDS. He's found that this virus has special characteristics which confuse the scientist and make it much more difficult to fight.
Some people say one way a virus escapes the immune system is to attack it. This virus does that. And some people say one way a virus can escape the immune system is to change its coat. This virus does that. Some people say one way a virus escapes the immune system is to put a lot of sugar on its coat. And that way antibodies which attack don't attack as well. This virus does that more than any other retrovirus we've ever seen, at least that I've ever worked with. Some people say that, finally, that the way a virus can escape defense mechanisms of a host is by hiding and not being expressed until certain moments. This virus does also that.
When you get AIDS, your body's wide open to secondary infections, like a skin cancer called Kaposi's sarcoma. People with AIDS lose several stone in weight and suffer many afflictions like diarrhea and breathlessness and brain damage. One of the most common infections, which is often fatal, is a particularly severe form of pneumonia called pneumocystis.
I couldn't breathe. I found it very difficult to breathe. I had gone into hospital earlier to speak to my doctor about it, and he confirmed then that I had pneumonia, and he didn't know what type of pneumonia though. So he put me on antibiotics. They were the wrong sort. So within a couple of days, my condition had gone worse, and I was actually collapsed. And I rang a friend up to sort of come and get me and take me to hospital.
Most AIDS victims die within 2 years of one infection or another. In America, the number of people with AIDS has been growing at a steady rate, reaching 14,500 cases. The growth is likely to continue. Britain is a few years behind, with only 241 reported cases so far. But the numbers are expected to grow at the same rate over the next few years. If the figures go on like this, we could reach 14,000 cases by 1990.
We're exactly following the American pattern, about 3 years behind.
And that means how many cases will we have perhaps by this time next year?
With a multiplication factor of doubling every 8 months, it would mean that we would have in 8 months' time about 450, and probably 4 months after that we'd be somewhere like 600.
Wherever AIDS comes from, and whoever it attacks, whether they're Africans, Americans, Europeans, men, women or children, it produces the same catastrophic, fatal results. The most pressing problem is to find a cure for AIDS, or at least to find a way of limiting the epidemic. And all over the Western world, scientists are feverishly looking for the first effective drug or the first effective vaccine. And for the patients, many of whom have been told that they're terminally ill, the race can't be run fast enough. Chris Gresham, who has been in hospital twice with pneumonia, now goes regularly to a specialist outpatient clinic in London. Dr. Charles Farthing takes frequent blood samples to check the spread of the virus and to monitor the state of his immune system. The doctor has urged him to try a new experimental drug. It's called Foscarnet, is made in Sweden and has worked successfully against other viruses.
Well, we of course can't promise you that this is going to be a cure for AIDS. Or necessarily have any great effect, but we feel it's essential, and obviously you do too, that we assess new drugs. We have noticed some side effects, or where the drug has been used elsewhere.
Doctors have to balance the need to test the new drugs against the risks to the patients. Farthing administers Foscarnet intravenously. Patients must stay in hospital for 3 weeks on a continuous drip. Some have experienced unpleasant side effects.
How does it sound after those side effects?
Well, I'm optimistic. I want to do it. I want to do the drug trial. The problems about the headaches and inflaming the veins, I think I can. I don't think it's going to bother me at all.
Well, they are relatively minor problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's you've got to take some things like that.
Right.
Farthing is encouraged by the early results of his clinical trials, but scientists are still only groping towards something that can vanquish AIDS. Drug researchers are attacking AIDS in two parallel ways. The first thing they're looking for is an antiviral drug that will kill the AIDS virus without harming the T cells. Dangerous side effects like these are the researchers' biggest problem. The second line of attack is to boost the destroyed immune system and build back the missing T cells so that patients can resist infections. The best solution will be to develop a drug cocktail that will both destroy the virus and boost the immune system at the same time. Desperation has driven American AIDS victims across the Mexican border to get drugs which are illegal in the United States. Tijuana is the first town over the border. This American smuggler visits a pharmacy to buy drugs in bulk.
Can you give me 80 of these? Yeah. Okay.
These drugs are frowned on by American doctors, but sell well to their AIDS patients.
And what's the exchange rate today?
The smuggler will charge an enormous markup when he resells the drugs. He's prepared to take risks at the frontier to make a big black market profit. In neighbouring California, 6 new AIDS cases are diagnosed every day, so sick patients will also take risks with smuggled drugs. A dying man consumes even unlicensed drugs greedily. Some even say they feel better. San Francisco General Hospital is in the front line of the war against AIDS. Paul Volberding leads a group of specialist doctors who have treated more AIDS patients than any other medical team. Dr. Volberding examines John Lorenzini, who's had AIDS for 18 months. But for all his experience, he has no cure to offer, no wonder drug to prescribe.
Well, it's changing that. I may have some new ones coming up here.
John's Kaposi's cancer lesions, KS for short, are spreading, but Volberding is as powerless to prevent this as any other doctor.
I'm a little bit concerned about the KS lesions.
The new ones?
The new ones. When we start to see new lesions with KS in somebody who's been successfully treated with anything, including vinblastine before, I'm concerned that it might mean that the treatment is no longer keeping things under control. Because if it's really true that new lesions are appearing, then I think we should quickly talk about what we do next, whether it's an experimental treatment or another conventional one. Scientifically, it's exciting to work with AIDS because it's a fascinating disease, and we expect to learn a lot, and we are learning a lot about other diseases through the study of this one. From a personal standpoint, it's very difficult, and it's very difficult for my staff and really any medical provider in the world taking care of large numbers of AIDS patients because they're so young. You know, it's one thing to take care of somebody and offer some understanding and supportive care when they're 70 or 80 years old and have lived their life. It's much more difficult emotionally when the person is your own age. In this case, many of my patients are exactly my own age, and it's very difficult to convince myself that it's not me lying there in the bed dying of this disease, so it is hard.
The most famous casualty of AIDS wasn't young, but he was a star. Rock Hudson died in October. Rock Hudson's personal pilgrimage in search of a cure took him to Paris for injections of a new drug, HPA-23. But in the end, nothing could stem the inevitable tide of the disease. Hudson gave up his struggle and came home, back to California, to die. Hudson's death removed some of the stigma from AIDS patients. Publicity about his treatment threw a spotlight onto the worldwide drug research. Paris has attracted the last hopes of many AIDS victims. Andrew Blythe, who comes from Brighton, is here to be treated with the same French drug, HPA-23, that Rock Hudson tried. Andrew originally came to Paris earlier this year with his lover, who has since died of AIDS. They felt that not enough was done for them in England.
My friend had been ill for about 2 months already, And then shortly after we arrived in Paris, I began to have breathing problems, and I guessed really what it was, and so they took me very seriously at the American hospital, and they admitted us both together. We had a double room. And it was very hard to appreciate at that point that I was in practice as sick as my friend, because essentially he seemed much more severely ill than I was. He was incontinent, he was immobile, he had brain complications. And so really it was just a question of good nursing and making him as comfortable as possible. And bizarrely, he actually died on the day I began my therapy at Salpêtrière Hospital.
Every day, Andrew crosses Paris to get an injection of HbA23 at a hospital clinic. Doctors at the hospital accept that their drug has toxic side effects and that there are no conclusive optimistic results. But for patients like Andrew, there seems no choice but to go on with what may be a risky treatment. Do you feel any doubts about being a guinea pig, as it were, for experimental treatment?
Not at all, and it irritates me that some scientists and doctors criticise individual research programmes and say that such and such might be a cancer-causing agent, when it's completely irrelevant. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to die of cancer in 10 years' time instead of dying of AIDS in a couple of weeks' time or a month's time. So that doesn't concern me at all.
Do you think that having been so close to somebody who did die has made you more frightened or less frightened of what may happen to you?
Less frightened, definitely. I'm not frightened of dying anyway. I'm just frightened of becoming incapable, incontinent, unable to make intelligent decisions. That frightens me very much, but I'm not frightened of dying as such.
The French drug was developed at the world-famous Pasteur Institute. Here, scientists have found the answer to infections like diphtheria and rabies. Now they've taken on AIDS. The Pasteur scientists plan to test drugs and vaccines slowly, carefully. The patients want quick, definite results. American Joe Fratiani travelled to France when his own doctors told him he had 2 years to live and they could do nothing. He has no time for conservatism about untried drugs.
There are too many people dying, and it just disheartens me to see my friends just die one after another and no one willing to do anything for them. We have to do these studies. We have to experiment on everyone that's willing to be experimented on and not said no to. We have to find something, and the French are willing to do that here. They're willing to experiment on anyone that wants to try, and to me that is the most positive thing that could happen anywhere.
Do you find that the attitudes of the patients who seem to demand every kind of treatment that they can get affects the scientific responsibility? Are you being pushed too far and too fast by the patients?
Well, I understand the attitude of the patient, of course. They want to be treated by anything which seems to be effective when they read the press. Of course, it's very difficult, and we want to help them as much as we can. But we have also not to make them in more trouble than they are. So the treatment has to be really adjusted. You know, a new treatment, for instance, we have to first make some experiments.
Recently, a different French hospital created a storm by claiming a breakthrough with another drug. Researchers announced that cyclosporin was the answer, although they'd only treated 2 people for 2 weeks. 1 has since died. French health officials defended the premature statement, saying the Anglo-Saxons might have hijacked our discovery. AIDS research has become the latest symbol of nationalist rivalry between France and the United States. Nobel Prizes and large commercial contracts for the drug companies are at stake, and so the competition has been jealous and intense. But so far, no one has been able successfully to claim victory. Today, one of the most hopeful drugs comes from a British-based pharmaceutical company. Azidothiamidine, AZT for short, or in American AZT, is causing flickers of hope. The Wellcome Foundation in Beckenham, Kent, is the parent company of the group making AZT. AZT has been developed by Wellcome scientists working in America. Extensive lab tests have shown that the drug is very effective against the AIDS virus. Now the researchers are pushing the system hard to finish their tests on human beings. Does the race to find a cure mean that the scientists are having to break the research rules?
Not the research rules, but many rules are being broken. and I think the necessary ones are being broken. What we've done is compressed the drug development process, at least in the United States, from 3 years down to 3 months in terms of just the process to get into man for the first time. And I think that if the rest of the urgency, the speed, and still the compression, but albeit good science in that compressed state, continues, we could have an answer very, very quickly if an answer is to be had. We will also be able to find out very quickly if this agent doesn't work, and we'll pick up another one and move just as quickly with it. It's this sense of urgency, I think, that's very important.
What sort of time limit could you put on successful results? Will this come too late for people who already have the virus?
I think that given the sort of timetable that we're working on, the way I understand the disease now, the proper trials, the proper patient categories could have us at the brink of an answer by mid-year of
Mid-86.
Yes, mid-86.
The National Institutes of Health in Washington are coordinating the American tests of new AIDS drugs. Patients in their hospital are treated with a wide variety of 6 or 7 experimental agents. A very sick patient may be beyond any help, but AZT is now gaining favour with the doctors.
I have a cautious sense of optimism on the basis of the preliminary studies. It is important to underscore that these are very early studies. We gave the drug to human beings for the first time. And in any study in which a drug is being used in human beings for the first time, an enormous sense of caution has to be kept in mind. And in addition, I think we have to be prepared for unexpected events, and it is very difficult to give conclusions before a final evaluation is undertaken. And with those cautionary notes, I would say that on the basis of the results so far, I see an interesting potential for this agent.
Dr. Broder's caution is deliberate, but if all goes well, many more patients will be brought into the trial after Christmas. In addition to those now in American hospitals, AIDS patients in London will then be offered AZT. Both these men have AIDS. Both were diagnosed some time ago with the symptoms which normally cripple a healthy body. But Tom Proctor on the left is still a long-distance runner, and Louis Nassani has become a bodybuilder. While the medical profession seeks a cure, Tom and Louis have turned away from conventional medicine. They're trying alternative therapy to cure their AIDS. They claim they've defeated it by positive thinking. Tom has Kaposi's cancer spots all over his face and neck. He admits that these are spreading right down his body to his legs. These lesions would concern AIDS doctors, but Tom says he feels better, and that's all that matters. Tom and Louis get their alternative treatment from a metaphysical counsellor in her Santa Monica home.
All right. We usually like to add a little crystal energy. Some people think crystals are very powerful. I think they're beautiful. So we do everything we can. We add a little crystal energy.
Louise Hay believes that AIDS can be cured by the power of self-love. Love yourself, heal your body is her slogan. Hay has no medical qualifications, but now treats 200 people with AIDS. She charges $10 a session, and for her, AIDS therapy has become an expanding business.
Let's begin by just doing an Om, Louis. Okay.
Louis' faith in this healing is supported by his hospital doctor. His immune system is doing well, his cancer's in remission. Tom doesn't have any ordinary medical treatment, so there are no objective checks on his condition.
Great. Did you fall asleep? No, this is very healing, yes.
Healing crystals and loving thought patterns may seem like a 1985 version of snake oil or voodoo, but 18 months ago, Louis, who now seems to be a picture of health, was, on his own admission, a physical wreck.
Well, I really consider that I look real creepy, bald, very white and pale and peaked and bumpy, not a very happy person, a very scared and frightened person, and depressed guy, and that, my whole facial and body looked like that.
What's going on in you?
Louise has taught her pupils so-called self-imagery. They try to stimulate recovery by talking directly to their T cells, encouraging them to grow strong.
Talk to the cells in your body a little, Louis.
I love my helper T cells. They are wonderful. My helper T cells are strong and are smiling and are fun, loving little helper T cells. They are very powerful, and I thank them for working overtime. And I appreciate them for multiplying and multiplying, coming back to this normal ratio.
Do you think you've got this beaten forever, or is this just something which has happened which may go away again?
There's no doubt that the AIDS virus has been beaten by myself. I have trained my body and my mind and my spiritual self to heal itself. And I've trained my body this way, and my body's always going to react this way as long as I keep my mental, positive, supportive, and healing thought patterns in this way. And I will never change. I will always be a positive, loving person, and my body will always be healing itself.
In London, consultant venereologist Dr. William Harris acknowledges that he sees patients in his clinic who turn successfully to alternative medicine.
I think that alternative medicine has always been used at a time in any situation in which the medicine which people such as myself practice doesn't work. And it is fair to say that this date and time, our medicine really doesn't work as far as AIDS is concerned. We can control and improve slightly the opportunistic infections, but we can't cure the patients. In such an environment, there would always be all kinds of quackery remedies and so on. But at the same time, it does appear that just as in certain forms of cancer, patients who are well motivated psychologically and have a desire to live can on occasions do surprisingly well when compared with individuals who decide that they are going to die.
Chris Gresham is a Buddhist. He draws strength from his faith and the disciplines of a ritual which he practices for several hours every day. His Buddhism has made his attitude to AIDS aggressively positive.
I think anything can be overcome. Anything. Any illness. There's many examples of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be AIDS or even cancer. I know I have friends who have actually overcome serious illnesses. So why can't this one be? And if one believes that, it's very important to believe that. And whenever doubt starts creeping in, to fight that doubt and not to give in to it. That's very important. If you give in to the doubt, you lose.
At a gay disco in London, casual homosexual contacts go on. Nearly a third of gay men in London now carry the AIDS virus. Preventing its spreading by changing sex habits may be better than a cure that doesn't exist. The Terence Higgins Trust, named after the first Briton to die from AIDS, is a small charity which so far has organised the AIDS prevention campaign in this country. Tony Whitehead, the chairman, thinks information must be given publicly and explicitly.
Here we have a fairly blunt advert which is in the gay press. Action against AIDS. Preventing the spread of HTLV-3, the virus which can cause AIDS, is the responsibility of all of us. And these simple guidelines will help protect you and your sexual partners. 1. Do not come inside your partner. 2. If you really want to fuck, use a condom and a water-based lubricant. And 3. Avoid activities which expose you and your partner to blood. And we go on to say, safer sex is a positive commitment to health and a positive commitment to our sexual identity.
And do you get the feedback that people take that in and then act on it?
For example, this small advert has had very positive feedback saying, yes, that's the kind of direct straightforward advice that we need if we're to make changes.
David Rampton is a campaigner from the Terence Higgins Trust who visits gay pubs and clubs all over London, spreading the word about how not to spread the virus. Since the summer, 90,000 leaflets have been distributed, but much more is needed, and the government campaign announced today will have to reach much wider to make a real impact.
Yes, and just have them around on the bar and so on.
Yes, of course.
And this one is new. It's pretty plain speaking. It's very much a kind of user's guide to what is and isn't a good idea.
Safer sex is now the message that needs to get across to everyone.
Also, there's this, which is a poster. It's quite big, but if you can find a place to stick that up, it's quite eye-catching. In fact, it's so eye-catching, people have nicked a lot of them. So stick it up well.
We'll chain it to our notice board, shall
Yeah,
we?
do. Both of them.
Is there evidence that the homosexual community, who presumably are aware of a risk, have altered their patterns of sex life?
Initially, there was some evidence that the rates of syphilis and gonorrhea, which are very good indicators of sexual promiscuity, were falling in the homosexual population. But in the last 12 months, as far as we've been concerned at Mary's, we've seen little change in the sexual behaviour patterns of many of our homosexual patients, that despite the risks, some are still behaving in a relatively unaltered manner.
How do you assess that?
Well, there's been no change in our figures for rectal gonorrhea for the past year. The numbers of homosexual patients we are seeing attending this clinic with rectal gonorrhea has remained the same for the past 12 months.
Jonathan Grimshaw is director of Body Positive, a pressure group supporting people with the virus. I asked him what was needed to get through to people all over the country.
Not everybody who is gay goes to gay pubs or clubs or places where we try to reach them. There are many people who may see themselves as predominantly heterosexual, married, who may have occasional gay encounters, and it's very difficult for us to reach those people.
And what about those people who are still just going on with casual sex?
Well, the only way that the message is going to get through to people like that is if there is a large, widespread national public health education campaign. And the only people with the resources to do that is the government.
I think really we should by now have got a good health education program. And I mean, what is a good health education program? But we should be now trying to make sure that we limit the spread of the disease as much as we possibly can. As yet, HTLV3 is not a major problem in our heterosexual society. But it would be prudent to prepare ourselves as if it were.
What's the main message then for heterosexuals as a preventative measure?
I would again say limit total numbers of sexual partners. And certainly, if people are going to take risks, then they should use condoms.
That's in normal intercourse?
In normal sexual intercourse, if they are travelling abroad, particularly to areas where the disease is rife, they should be very careful.
Minister, the largest part of the package that the government have announced today is concerned with public information. What groups are you trying to reach?
Well, as you say, it's concerned with public information to try and control the spread of this awful virus. And we're going to target that information campaign towards the groups which are the high-risk groups, the male homosexuals, the people who are drug abusers, and their close contacts. Equally well, we want a wider public information campaign, what are sometimes called the bridging groups, and also, I think, to the general public to be aware of what is happening.
The voluntary groups are very explicit and direct in the kind of advice they give to the gay community. Can the government be this frank about sex?
Well, I suspect that probably not in terms of me replying to you now as a government minister. I wouldn't have the technical knowledge to do so. But I think it is important, and this is why we are looking and getting advice upon the effectiveness of the campaigns which are under consideration to work closely with the responsible leaders within the gay community, the Terence Higgin Trust and others, to get their advice so that we are as certain as we can be that the public money that we will be spending on the information campaign will be effectively used to get the message across.
If the government is serious, we may soon see commercials like this one on British television.
Now, I want to talk to you about discipline. Not the kind you read about in those pink section ads, son. No, I'm talking about self-discipline. The real message is you've got to learn to say no to unsafe sex. And that can take a lot of self-discipline. Like when you find yourself in bed with a hot number asking you to do something that sounds exciting but is unsafe. You know. Well, perhaps your brother can tell you better or explain to you.
What Mother's trying to tell you is that discipline is an important part of playing safely. By disciplining yourself to follow a few basic rules, you can protect yourself and others from AIDS.
The messages from Mother have been promoted with all the razzmatazz of an American political campaign. It's cost over $4 million. Mother has become a cult figure who rides in parades and makes public appearances, urging her followers to play safely. I asked the actress who plays Mother and the director of the ad campaign why they thought this rather kinky character was suitable for the AIDS message.
Well, the aim itself was to provide a character that would be both appealing to our major target, gay men at that time, but also a figure that would adjust readily into the mainstream community.
This is a human tragedy. It is not a tragedy for just a section of the pie. This is everybody's tragedy and everybody's obligation to be responsible for themselves, their partners, and people they love. I don't know a soul in this world that I want to disappear from the face of this earth from this teeny tiny virus.
You can't miss the Play Safely slogan in America. We have yet to see what happens here. No doctor and no health campaign can save a desperately sick AIDS patient, already riddled with infections and with no immune system to protect him. But San Francisco Hospital has seen hopeful signs just in the last 2 months. Doctors are pleased that they've admitted far fewer patients in October and November than they expected. On the projections, they expected about 240. Only 60 came in. Has the education campaign worked? Does this mean the epidemic is under control?
2 people diagnosed each day with AIDS and 1 person dying of AIDS every day is not anywhere near control. But what I think we are seeing, hopefully, is that some of the effect of the intensive education that we mounted in May of 1983, 2.5 years ago, is now showing us in a decrease in the incidence of new cases being diagnosed.
So would you expect that in a country like Britain, which hasn't yet reached an epidemic peak of this, that if we could have that sort of education program now, we'd never reach an epidemic?
That's it. Unfortunately, with AIDS, we don't have a cure for people that have been infected with the virus. We don't yet have a vaccine, and that may be a little bit down the road. The only thing we have here is education, and I think education is most effective when it's preventative. And I urge any country that does not have an epidemic the size of ours in the United States to have the government contribute to the education of the people so that people know what AIDS is and what AIDS isn't, how it's spread and how it isn't, and so that it can be eradicated before it becomes a major problem.
Well, if you wish to find out where to get more information about AIDS, you can hear recorded details by phoning this number. It's 01 571 6822, and that's any time this week. Well, Out of Court on BBC Two this Wednesday looks at the potential problems of coping with AIDS in prison, following the first death from AIDS in a British prison. The programme visits the AIDS ward in Sing Sing Prison, New York, to see how America is coping with what some British governors believe could be their problem tomorrow. That's Out of Court on Wednesday at 10 to 8 on BBC Two.